What's doing? I'm Alec. Thank you for watching First Class Fatherhood. Today's guest is Mike Lindell, the founder and CEO of MyPillow. Mike has got an incredible story of going from crack addict to CEO. He's a big inspiration to me because this week marks 2 years that I have been sober myself, so it's a big honor to have Mike on the podcast with me. Don't forget to smack that subscribe button down below so you can check out the interviews I've done with so many amazing dads. So let's do this right now with Mike Lindell on First Class Fatherhood. Joining me now, First Class Father, Mike Lindell. Welcome to First Class Fatherhood.
Thanks for having me on.
All right, let's start it like this. How many kids do you have? How old are they?
I have 4 kids, and the oldest is, I think they go from like 33 to 29 or 35 to 29. They're all close in age.
And what type of sports or activities were they all into growing up?
Well, the boys played baseball. We went hunting, fishing, but involved in football. They were involved in a lot of different activities.
Okay. You ever get involved with coaching them with any of the sports, or you always watch that stuff from the sideline?
Just 1 year that I did it. I was a former addict, so I was a very functioning addict. So I think because of my insecurities, I only coached that 1 year, and it just was uncomfortable. The other coaches kind of took over more of the stuff that I did.
Yeah, and if you could, Mike, please just take a minute here to hit my listeners with a little bit about your background and what you do.
Yeah, well, I've always been an entrepreneur, but I ended up inventing MyPillow in 2004, and it's a long journey that. I quit all my addiction, including crack cocaine, on January 16, 2009. And God's put me in this incredible platform where, I've sold over 47 million MyPillows, but that's just a platform for much bigger things. So it's been quite a journey.
Yeah, very good. When did fatherhood come into all this for you? About how old were you when you became a dad, and how did becoming a father kind of change your perspective on life?
Well, I became a dad. I married in 1987, and she had a daughter 2 years old, and so I became kind of an instant father. But I've always been the oldest child, and I come from a family divorce when I was 7 years old. So I was put into being the oldest of the siblings, and then in 1987 we had my first biological child, Lizzie, and so yeah, it was life changing, and it was a blessing, and then we had back to back, we had the 2 boys after that, and so.
Yeah, and Mike, like you, I'm a recovering alcoholic and an addict myself here, and a lot of times people want to always ask, what was the thing that made you finally quit? So was there a certain sick and tired of being sick and tired moment that led to you? What was the case for you to get sober?
Well, I got a book out called "What Are the Odds from Crack Addict to CEO," and it was a journey of life. It was a long journey. God was always chasing me, and I would tell my friends, we got to quit this stuff, and it's I would tell them about Bible that I read about in jail and stuff, and they'd end up quitting, and I'd keep going, and it got to January 16, 2009, and when people say, "Was that your bottom?" I made sure I didn't have any money or any material things left, so I could show with God all things are possible. But for me, I knew that day that if I went one more day, I used to work in a drive-in movie theater, and you had these after the first feature, there'd be a next feature, and this was like where I was in my life. I knew that if I waited one more day, there'd be 2 choices: real A of the next part of my life, or real B. And my calling would be gone at real A. I knew that it would be wherever path this was taking me. And so, was it a bottom? I guess it was a choice at that time. And it built up to where I knew that, I couldn't go another day because things were going to be different. It was going to be down this dark path, or with God, all things are possible. So my prayer was that I'd be freed of the desire, and I woke up the next morning and all the desire was gone. But I do want to say 2 months later, I ended up going to a faith-based treatment center at our church. And I learned a lot of why I was an addict in the first place. And it all went back to, that divorce, to fatherlessness, to, I don't believe addiction is you're born with it. I believe it's stuff from childhood, from the fatherlessness or father wounds or trauma, all these things that manifest. For me, I got put into a new school when I was 7 years old, and I would either show off or I wouldn't talk to people. I became very almost shy. And you can't get rejected if you don't talk to people. So I think a lot of people get wounds. I'm not good enough. I'm unworthy. And this is what manifests into that.
Yeah, and for me, like you said there, I know you're a faith-based person. I am myself, and a lot of times, like it really is. It's a radical change of mind, and really that's what it is in the Bible, where it says to repent. The word repent, it actually means a change of mind. It's a radical change of mind, is what they're asking for, and that's what it was for me. It was a mindset shift. I was stuck in a mindset myself, and I didn't even see a way out of it until I started to have that change of mind. So I love to hear recovery stories and stuff like that, because I understand what it's all about. I grew up with it my entire life. I lost my father to cirrhosis of the liver. Alcoholism has plagued my family since I've been a kid. So I always love to see success stories like yours. Now, I mean, obviously you've hit home run here with the My Pillow. Were you always an entrepreneur even as a kid? Where did that entrepreneurial spirit start for you?
Yeah, I only had two jobs. So back in the day when I worked for a drive-in movie theater and I worked for a grocery store, I ended up getting fired at the grocery store because I didn't like the way he did things. He goes, you know what? If you don't like things, why don't you get your own business someday? And those words I kept bringing with me. But I was always an entrepreneur, from having a garden and selling the stuff by the road to I worked on a farm in Iowa too for my uncle. I said, you know what? He's making all the money. I'm going to go raise pigs myself. And I bought some, put them in a residential area basically. And it didn't work out so well. But I'm carpet cleaning. My sister flooded a second-story building in an apartment complex with a waterbed back in the early 80s, I guess. And I became a carpet cleaner. And I became a lunch wagon business. I had all these different businesses, but it was all problem solutions. So I've always been an entrepreneur, you learn. If you fail here, you learn from it, and you just get better and better and better. So I enjoy it.
Yeah, well said. And have you had any, your kids are older. My oldest, I have 4 kids myself. My oldest is 14. My youngest is 5. So I'm not there yet. Did you have any of these drug or alcohol issues with any of your kids so far?
Just, I did with the one son, and he got into marijuana and drinking. And he's had a son now, my grandson, and him and his wife. They both had problems with alcohol and drugs and marijuana, but they've gotten clean, and they've fell in the Lord, and they just put everything into that little grandson of mine, and it's just been amazing. So, but a lot of times I'm very blessed that way, because a lot of times dysfunction, and I want to say something. Addiction affects everyone, no matter how many forks you eat with. I think people get the perception, addiction, that's just somebody on the street. No, there's all kinds of addiction. There's overeating, there's drugs, there's alcohol, there's sex, there's porn. There's all these different addictions that's used to hide pain and hide reality in a false sense of reality, or hiding pain. And usually that dysfunction will go over to the neck, to your kids and stuff. And so it's a great question you asked, but I've been very blessed that it basically affected one of the siblings. Now, I'm sure it affected the other ones. It just didn't manifest into addiction.
Yeah, and you know what? Just alcohol alone, on average, there's 88,000 deaths in the United States every year just from alcohol-related incidences. And it's like right now we're in a pandemic, and liquor stores are deemed essential. So it's like the way we see alcohol being advertised on every sporting event, we always see it like it's glorified. Every celebration involves beer and champagne and alcohol, and it really gives this illusion. I mean, I drive before the pandemic. I mean, I always drive Uber on the weekends as a side hustle, and every mile I drive of Uber drives me further towards sobriety, because all I do is see these people, and it doesn't look like it does on the commercial. I see lives just getting destroyed night after night here with this stuff.
Absolutely. They need their hearts restored. And I said during this pandemic, I'll tell you what, if anybody's watching this out there that we'll do both sides. If you're an addict that's made it through, now it's a great time to reach out to your friends, same age, and maybe the same alcohol or drugs, whatever it was. They look for common hope, and you can reach out to them and witness to them, and help them. They're looking for hope. They're living in fear right now with this pandemic. And what a great time to get them set free. And if you're an addict, on the other hand, sitting at home, obviously, there's a lot of things you can't get to the faith-based treatment centers that actually work. The secular ones do not work. I will say that straight up from experience. But I will tell you, if you're an addict, everyone knows people that have died and everything from this, like the opiate addiction, the heroin, and all this. Reach out to someone your age. Everyone knows someone that's made it through. Reach out to them. That's your hope match. So many people call me Mike. You give me hope and inspiration. But the closer you get to your own age and the same drug, that you reach out to them and say, how'd you make it through? How'd you make it through? We could make this the greatest AA meeting in history using Jesus Christ as our higher power, not all this other stuff that's made up. And in doing that, this will be part of the biggest revival ever. People look for hope in times of when things are bad. And there's nothing worse right now than this pandemic. And we need to take away that fear and fill it with peace and hope.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. Very well said, Mike. And I see it as right now. I mean, everybody seems to be taking something in this country. Everybody is on something, no matter if it's prescribed or if it's recreational. It just seems like it's way overboard. And right now, obviously, too, I know I've seen you at the White House speaking there with the president. I know that you're a Trump supporter. I've had Eric Trump on my show here on the podcast, and I got destroyed for having him on here. And it's like we've never seen such a divide and such hatred coming politically in this country, which it seems to be getting out of control. Because that you have been supporting Trump, has that hurt your business in any way? Has that affected you and the MyPillow and the whole story?
Right. Well, let me tell you something. You go back to this. When I quit all my addiction, I came out of it. I had never voted. I didn't know anything about politics. I had never paid attention. I was an addict. Well, I came out of that and I look around me and it was like the world had changed. A president was giving money to an evil empire. All my friends were unemployed. They were losing their houses and all these things. And I'm going, what happened? What did I miss? And then in the summer of 2016, then candidate Donald Trump reached out to me to meet me. It was a private meeting in New York City and in Trump Tower. And I met with him for a half hour. And he was telling me, Mike, you're my pillow. You make it here in the U.S. And we talked about, I told him, I'm going to have this big network to help addicts. I said I was a former crack addict. This amazing man, I listened to, took in this info, goes back and forth. And I walked out there and he said what he was going to do to help the drugs and bring jobs back. And I walked out there. I said, wow, he's going to be the greatest president in history. I went and talked to his workers and his employees, and every one of them that said, he's the best boss. I had to validate what I had just seen. And so I got back to Minnesota. Now this is August of 2016, and I was Minnesota's darling. They would, if I reached out to the media, they'd go, hey, you're doing this. Let's come and do a story on it. Well, I reached out and did a press release that I had met with Donald Trump, and I didn't even say what we talked about. I was attacked, called a racist and everything else. Nobody had me on their show. Lawyers in California attacked me. The Better Business Bureau took me from an A+ to an F. And I'm going, what did I do? But you know what? I stood fast for what I believed in. And now I'll tell you what, my busiest day is always the day we're in. God has rewarded me for standing tall. Just when I always wear my cross on TV, I got attacked for that too all the time. And I'll tell you what, right now, it's almost like when I was at the Rose Garden, I got attacked right after that, right after my speech. It was like a rerun from years ago. But it didn't bother me this time because you know what? Those are just hosts out there and a few far lefts, because this isn't about politics to me. We're all in this together. I was never a Republican or a Democrat, but I know one thing. This president, he's changed a party into the common sense party. And I stand behind him. I've seen what the great hope he gave us before this pandemic with common sense, what can be done. And I'll tell you what, I was so proud of everybody that got behind me from both sides when I got attacked after the Rose Garden speech. For one person on Twitter that said something bad, 100 people went, wait a minute, he's helping make masks and helping this. And, all he said was, hey, let's stay at home and pray and get into our Bibles and bring God. God turned his back we turned our country, we turned our back on God. And I said, let's get back in the Word. And it was great to see that amount of support, because it's a very small voice that has the big media and the fake news and all this stuff. I'm not going to change. So it was funny. They go, boycott Mike Lindell and My Pillow. And then another one will come up there, another bot or troll will go, don't boycott him. He'll double his ads. We see enough of that guy. And that's the truth. The more you go after me, I'm coming right back. To the point of I get fed up with stuff going on in my home state of Minnesota, and people want me to run for governor. We'll see.
Well, I would love to see you do that, Mike. And I couldn't have been happier to hear you in the Rose Garden talking about, because you're right. This country has turned its back on God. And I try to help with the kids that I'll talk to, and I'll use athletes, and I'll say, you know what, they suppress God so much, but when you see an athlete that just wins the Super Bowl or does these things, the first thing they do, what do? They thank God for him. For their victory, and they boast in the Lord, and you see that, and then they can't suppress that because it's live TV, and if they could, they would. But I'm right there with you. I think that if we about with addiction, the president is somebody that he doesn't drink, he doesn't smoke, his kids don't drink, and they're not addicts, they're not druggies. So everyone thinks like, oh, you could be a multimillionaire, like it's so simple to do, when we've seen Hollywood and all these places that are millionaires just littered with alcohol, drugs, and many of them fill up the cemeteries because of it.
Well, they're empty. They're empty. They need their hearts are broken. Their hearts are smashed. They need their hearts restored. I pray for those people every day. I'll tell you, I was out in Hollywood last year with my movie Unplanned, and I was at a red carpet event, and this was it's a true story of Abby Johnson. She worked for Planned Parenthood, seeing what was going on and flipped, and I was out there, and there was all these protesters, and they're going, hey, Mike, can we get your picture? I went right over to them. They said, put your signs on, took pictures with them, it just shows you that and then I asked them, I said, what are you guys, pro-choice or something going on here? And they said, oh no, we're getting paid. They were paid protesters. And I went there in the summer of 2016, and I was doing a TV show, and everyone in the room, they were, I was saying how I supported Donald Trump, and they're going, a hush fell over the crowd. And throughout the whole day, everyone came up to me and said, I'm really voting for him, but I can't say it here. And only one person was controlling that whole narrative, because they couldn't, if I said it to you or you said it to me, going, hey, we got one over here, I just don't understand it. You got this great common sense, pragmatic president who's got a gift from God of taking in all this information and being able to make a good decision, knowing what it's going to manifest to. Not just problem solution, but knowing what it's going to manifest to. And we're so blessed to have him in charge of our country at such a time as this. And it's just, I just can't say. That's why I'm all in, and I ain't changing.
Yeah, and you know what, Mike, I have press credentials for the White House. I've been there many times, right in the briefing room there with all of these White House correspondents, and I'm always the fish out of water. But just to see what goes on there is very, very alarming and eye-opening with the way that they're shaping stories, and they have their agendas, and it's just like basically almost like whatever fits the suit, like, is what they're going for there. They already have the story there. They just need the clip or the soundbite. So it's I'm not getting into any more of that. Bringing it back into you as a dad here. What type of disciplinarian have you been as a dad, and is it different than the discipline style that you grew up with?
No, it was about this. I think it was about the same. I only, it's kind of a funny story here. I only had to spank one of my kids one time. He had shot the neighbor kid with a dart gun or something. And I told him not to shoot him around the house or whatever. And I just went to spank him. And here's what he said to me. He goes, you can't spank me. My teacher said I can sue you. I said, well, good for you. And I spanked him and said, tell your teacher we'll split the money. But it was, I had neighbors that all their kids, even their kids, I remember grounding a neighbor kid. My kid goes, you can't ground him. He's not your kid. The neighbors seemed to, they all trusted me with their kids. We were like the hub. All the kids were over there, and I built forts and stuff for the kids and in the backyard. And it was kind of, I guess it was the same kind of discipline. It was, more of a grounding. It wasn't it wasn't very strict. I wasn't very strict. I mean, my parents, because of that, I guess maybe because of the divorce, and when I be with my dad, then there's no rules went out the window because you didn't see him that much. And with my mom and my stepdad, it was like when new rules got put in, but I was rebellious because all of a sudden I didn't have rules. Then I had rules, and so we had, for a dysfunctional family, we were very I think so. I've said it before, addiction affects everyone, no matter how many forks you eat with. But as a parent, there's all levels of addiction, and to be a functioning addict or a functioning parent that in that space, I think it was very similar. Like I say, it wasn't there wasn't any anger things. You didn't have that type of a thing or any violent stuff. It was mostly just. I guess if I'd say what I did wrong parenting, it was because of my own, back then it was cocaine, my own self, the stuff I did with my kids was more for me. Some of my kids, I'd have them doing things they didn't even want to do. My one kid, I didn't really particularly like hunting, and I'd say, no, you're coming with us, and we're going to have so much fun, it'll take a smile off our face. Well, he didn't like it, and I'm going to, and you're trying to force things to, rather, if I look back now, I'd want to listen more and say, what would you like to do? And those are the things that it was a lot of my self-centeredness being, as a parent. And so that's, if I could change anything, it would have been that.
Yeah, and I think just like how we said, how the country's turned its back on God, the family unit in this country has been completely destroyed and broken down. We have a bad fatherless crisis in our country. So many kids are growing up without a dad, and we look at the results of that. The stats on kids that become more addicted, teenage pregnancies, teenage suicide, it all correlates with the amount of kids that are growing up without a father or father influence in their life. So it has just as devastating effects, combined with the fact that God's been removed from society. Just those two things alone, if we could straighten them out, I think most of these problems we're seeing in our country would start to just go away here.
You're 100% right. I want to tell you, they did a poll of a prison. This was 2 years ago. And they did this poll. Now, prisons are felons. They're in there more than a year, and it's not county jail. Okay, they did a poll. How many of the inmates that were in there, both of their parents got married, planned to say, hey, let's have a child, have the child, and we're still together while the person was in that prison? What percentage do you think of the prison population?
I would say under 5%.
It was 0.
Yeah.
And they tested another prison. It was 0. When you went down to the county jail level, which was usually, like gross misdemeanors and stuff, it went up a little bit. And if you'd never been in trouble, it was up the marriage rate, just like I just told you, was way up here, the family unit. And you hit the two most important things, like I said at the Gross Garden. We took God out of our schools. We took the families out. Look at the black demographics, in after the 1960s. I got divorced when divorces weren't common. I was the only kid in my school from a divorced, from a divorced family. And all my friends, in Minneapolis, when they did, all these, none of them, the fatherless, they said, okay, we'll pay you more if you don't have a father. That's what the government did back then, in the late 60s. And so look, all this stuff, all the fatherless now is just, I'm very great friends with Jack Brewer, and he, we're doing stuff in these prisons now, and all it is fatherlessness. And then the grandmother becomes the matriarch, becomes the mother to the children, and that's kind of, I experienced some of that because my grandma, I got the closest to my grandma when my mom's working, and during those few years that I didn't, during this divorce of mine. So I've lived with all that. I've seen it with my own eyes and see what it manifests to. And you are 100% right. You bring God back, you bring the family unit back, and man, it wipes out so many bad things. It's absolutely, it could be amazing. And I do believe that we're in the greatest revival in world history, because you know what? People don't pray and look to God except for in times that they need something or things are bad, and things are looking pretty tough.
Yeah, no atheist in a foxhole. I agree with you, Mike, and I have all the faith in the world that it is coming back, and we are on the path for a revival here, and I look forward to it. And you've had so much success here already. What kind of goals or plans do you have here for yourself for the future?
Well, I've got, I've been working so hard with this stuff with this pandemic, and I've heard so many good things, which you're going to hear about soon. But the president picked, he appointed me as chairman of the Minnesota Trump campaign. I've realized now how important politics are to our everyday lives. So, I might end up going that route. And we'll have to see. I'll pray about it. But what I am going to be doing is My Pillow has always been a platform for something much bigger. So I've been evangelizing, speaking to massive crowds. I have a big thing coming up. It's called The Return in Washington, D.C. in September. It'll be one of the biggest evangelist events in world history, speaking at that. But when this pandemic ends, I'm going to launch, it's called the Lindell Recovery Network. It's going to help millions of addicts out of addiction. And I've been working on it 2 years. I self-funded. I published my own book, self-published, and even bought my own paper so that I pre-printed 3 million copies. And that money is going for my own network. It's just going to be amazing. I vetted 4,500 faith-based treatment centers that work, over 60,000 churches involved, and the best online help in history. So my thing is just to spread God's word and be evangelist and whatever. That where my pillow has always been just a platform. So I got a lot of things going, but here's what I can tell you. I go by Proverbs 3:5-6. Trust in the Lord with all your heart, and lean not on your own understandings, and always acknowledge him, and he will guide your paths. And that's what I'm living by.
Yeah, great stuff, Mike. And you know what? Last thing I'm going to hit you with here, I'd love to ask all the dads that I get on the podcast here, what type of advice do you have for the new dad or for that about-to-be father who's out there listening?
Really, really listen to your child and hear him. Be in the moment and hear him. And that's, I think that's just so important. Let him be heard, that he or she be heard, and just enjoy it. I'll tell you what, and then enjoy those years because they pass so fast. They just, in a blink of an eye, your kids are older, and you go, what did I miss? So enjoy every moment, enjoy it, and really let them be heard, because you know what? There's so much joy in that you can't imagine, and that's my advice.
Yeah, very well said, Mike. I really appreciate the opportunity. It's been an honor for me. I got to say, you're a first-class father all the way, and thank you so much for giving me a few minutes of your time here on First Class Fatherhood.
Thanks for having me on. God bless.